Meanwhile, in the nursery wing of InGen's Site B facility, while the world debates the ethics of genetic resurrection and tourists marvel at full-grown attractions, someone still has to document the behavioural patterns of infant velociraptors who've started copying her every movement, even when she realises they're learning faster than anyone predicted. Welcome, friend. You've found your way to another quiet corner of a world made famous by teeth and terror. Tonight, you're stepping into the observation deck of the nursery wing on Isla Sorna, where your clipboard fills with behavioural notes, while newly hatched specimens develop behind reinforced glass, while executives plan park attractions and scientists splice DNA strands. You're mainly concerned with whether Subject V7's increased mimicry of your hand gestures means cognitive development is exceeding projected parameters, and what that might mean for everyone. In a world built on controlling the uncontrollable, small observations become the first warnings of larger truths. Intelligence isn't announced on Isla Sorna. It's documented in careful notes, recognized in subtle patterns. Understood too late. Now get comfortable. Let the hum of climate control systems surround you, and allow the soft chirping of infant predators to guide you gently toward rest. So before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight. It helps me know who's keeping watch during these quiet hours. Now settle in, let the weight of the day fall away, and let the steady rhythm of pen on paper guide you gently toward rest. The fluorescent lights in the nursery wing hum at a frequency that's become as familiar as your own heartbeat over the past 14 months on Site B. 14 months since you accepted InGen's offer, 14 months since you signed the extensive NDAs, 14 months since you first laid eyes on something that shouldn't exist, but does. The observation deck occupies the north end of the facility's second floor, a sprawling room of reinforced glass panels and monitoring stations that overlooks 12 separate nursery enclosures, each one a carefully controlled environment designed to nurture specimens from hatching through juvenile development. Your workstation sits at the centre of the observation deck, positioned to provide optimal viewing angles for enclosures 7 through 12, the current active nurseries housing this generation's specimens. It's not much, a standard issue desk with a locked filing cabinet, 3 monitors displaying real-time feeds from the enclosure cameras, and the worn leather chair that you've carefully adjusted over countless shifts until it supports your back during the long observation sessions. But it's yours, this small space dedicated to understanding behaviours that evolution never intended to exist in this epoch. The desk surface bears the accumulated evidence of meticulous documentation, standardized behavioral coding sheets, developmental milestone charts, and your personal notebook, where observations too nuanced for official forms find their record. A coffee mug sits cold and forgotten from this afternoon, the InGen logo faded from countless washings, containing the dregs of what was once decent Colombian coffee, but has long since surrendered to the tropical heat that penetrates even the facility's aggressive air conditioning. Outside the windows that line the observation deck's eastern wall, you can see the Philippine Sea stretching toward the horizon, its surface painted orange and purple by the setting sun that's just beginning its descent toward evening. The view is stunning when you allow yourself to notice it. Pristine beaches, untouched jungle, the occasional pteranodon gliding past in search of fish. It's paradise if you ignore the electrified fences and the careful compartmentalization that keeps various species from discovering each other's existence. The nursery wing itself is a marvel of biological engineering and architectural paranoia. Every surface is either reinforced glass rated to withstand impacts that would shatter conventional materials, or concrete walls thick enough to contain even the most determined escape attempt. The air recycling system runs constantly, maintaining precise temperature and humidity levels while filtering out potential pathogens that might compromise the specimen's deliberately engineered immune systems. Emergency protocols are posted every 20 feet. Evacuation routes marked in green containment procedures in yellow, last resort termination protocols in red. Your shift technically started at 1600 hours, but you arrived early as always, needing those extra minutes to review the previous shift's notes and prepare mentally for the 8 hours of careful observation ahead. The day shift behavioral specialist, Dr. Martinez, a competent but uninspired researcher who treats this job as a stepping stone to more prestigious positions, had left his standard reports, nothing unusual, normal feeding responses, expected developmental markers, the kind of observations that satisfy InGen's bureaucratic requirements, but miss the subtleties that really matter. Because what Martinez doesn't notice, what most of the staff doesn't notice in their rush to complete standardized assessments and move on to the next task, are the small deviations that suggest something more complex developing behind those amber eyes. The way subject V7 watches your movements with an intensity that goes beyond simple visual tracking. The patterns in their play behavior that suggest problem solving rather than instinct. The moments when you could swear they're not just observing but analyzing, filing away information for future use. You pick up your favorite pen, a fountain pen your mentor gave you years ago, before InGen, before Impossible Creatures when you were just a graduate student, studying primate behavior in Costa Rica. The weight of it in your hand is grounding, a reminder of simpler times when the subjects you observed were merely clever rather than potentially revolutionary. The ink flows smoothly as you begin tonight's initial observations, noting the time, temperature, humidity, and the baseline activity levels in each active enclosure. Enclosure 7 houses subject V7, a 3-week-old velociraptor that hatched on November 15th at 0342 hours. The species designation still sends a small shiver through you every time you write it. Velociraptor mongoliensis, or at least InGen's hybridized version of it, engineered from fragmentary DNA and filled in with genetic sequences from modern species. V7 is small by adult standards, roughly the size of a large chicken, covered in downy proto-feathers that give it an almost endearing appearance if you ignore the already prominent sickle claw on each foot. The enclosure itself is a masterwork of habitat simulation. Native plants, from what paleobotanists believe, resembled Velociraptor's original environment, carefully maintained at optimal growth to provide both shelter and enrichment. The substrate is a mixture of sand and soil that allows for natural digging behaviours. Hidden speakers provide ambient sounds, insects, distant calls from other dinosaurs, the rustle of wind through prehistoric foliage, creating an auditory landscape that theoretically promotes normal psychological development. Temperature controls maintain a steady 78 degrees Fahrenheit during day hours, dropping to 72 at night to simulate natural circadian patterns. The lighting system is even more sophisticated, providing full-spectrum illumination that shifts throughout the day, including UV wavelengths essential for proper bone development. It's more advanced than most human nurseries, this carefully crafted environment designed to nurture something that hasn't walked the earth for 65 million years. V7 is currently engaged in what the standardized forms classify as play behavior, manipulating a series of puzzle feeders that the enrichment team installed yesterday. But watching more carefully, you notice patterns that the classification doesn't capture. The systematic way V7 approaches each feeder, testing mechanisms in sequence rather than randomly. The pause after each unsuccessful attempt, a moment of what looks remarkably like consideration before trying a different approach. The quick glance toward the observation window, toward you, after successfully opening the third feeder, as if checking whether you noticed. You did notice. You always notice. Your pen moves across the paper, capturing these observations in the informal shorthand you've developed over months of documentation. V7 demonstrates sequential problem-solving approach to puzzle feeders, apparent hypothesis testing rather than trial-error learning, possible awareness of observer presence and reaction. the official forms, would require you to reduce this to a check mark next to demonstrates normal play behavior, but your personal notes preserve the nuance that might matter later. Enclosure 8 houses subjects, C12 and C13, a pair of infant Compsognathus that are 4 weeks old. They're engaged in what appears to be social play, chasing each other through the miniature landscape of their habitat. Their movements are quick, darting, almost impossible to track precisely without the slow-motion camera feeds. But even at normal speed, you can see the complexity in their interactions, the establishment of roles, the communication through body language, the rules of engagement that they seem to create and modify as they play. The Compsognathus enclosure is smaller than V7's, designed for their more modest adult size and social nature. Multiple levels connected by branches and artificial rock formations create a three-dimensional playground that encourages climbing and jumping behaviors. The feeding system is automated, dispensing small insects at regular intervals to maintain their metabolism without encouraging food aggression. It's a delicate balance, providing enough stimulation to promote healthy development while maintaining the control necessary for scientific observation. C12, the slightly larger of the pair, initiates most of the play sequences. A quick nip at C13's tail, followed by a rapid retreat to higher ground. C13 responds predictably at first, giving chase with the determination of the perpetual younger sibling. But then something interesting happens. C13 stops mid-chase, cocks its head in what you've come to recognize as their thinking posture, and takes an alternate route that cuts off C12's escape path. It's strategic thinking, planning ahead rather than simply reacting. You document this carefully, adding it to the growing body of evidence that these specimens are developing cognitive abilities that exceed initial projections. The original genetic engineers, led by Dr. Henry Wu, had anticipated intelligence comparable to modern birds, clever but limited, operating primarily on instinct with some capacity for learning. But what you're observing suggests something more complex developing, especially in V7. Enclosure 9 is empty tonight, its previous occupant, a young Pachycephalosaurus, having been transferred to the juvenile compound yesterday. The empty habitat looks strange, almost melancholy, its carefully maintained environment, waiting for the next generation of impossible life. The cleaning crew will come through tomorrow, sterilizing every surface, resetting the enrichment items, preparing for the next hatching that's scheduled for early next week. Enclosure 10 houses subject T23, and this is where your attention always lingers longest. T23 is a 2-week-old triceratops, and by all accounts, it should be the least interesting observation of your shift. Herbivores, the conventional wisdom goes, don't develop the complex behaviors that predators do. They grow, they eat, they socialize in predictable patterns. But T23 has been different from the start. The Triceratops enclosure is the largest in the nursery wing, designed to accommodate their eventual bulk, even at this early stage. The vegetation is real, ferns, cycads, and other plants that existed in the Cretaceous period, grown from seeds recovered from amber or recreated from genetic templates. The atmosphere is more humid than the other enclosures, mimicking the coastal lowlands where Triceratops fossils are most commonly found. T23 stands near the feeding trough, but it's not eating. Instead, it's arranging pieces of vegetation in what appears to be a deliberate pattern. A large fern frond placed carefully in the centre, smaller leaves arranged in a rough circle around it. You've seen this behaviour before, 3 times in the past week, and each time the pattern is slightly different but clearly intentional. It's not nest building. T23 is far too young for reproductive behaviours. It's not food caching. Triceratops don't exhibit that behaviour. It's something else, something unprecedented. You lean forward in your chair, adjusting the camera angle to better capture T23's activity. The young Triceratops, barely the size of a large dog despite its species' eventual massive size, continues its careful arrangement. Its movements are precise, deliberate. When a piece doesn't sit correctly, T23 adjusts it with surprising dexterity using its beak and front feet. The concentration is evident in its posture, the way its tail remains still, the focused attention that excludes everything else in the enclosure. After several minutes, T23 steps back and observes its creation. Then, and this is what makes your pulse quicken every time, it looks directly at the observation window. Not a glance, not a random visual scan, but a deliberate look that lasts several seconds, as if it's showing you what it made, as if it expects something. Recognition, approval, understanding. You write furiously, trying to capture not just what you're seeing, but what it might mean. T23 exhibits possible proto-artistic or communicative behaviour, deliberate arrangement of natural materials in non-functional pattern, apparent awareness of observer, and possible attempt at communication through display. These observations would sound insane in a mainstream zoological context, but here, in this place where the impossible is routine, they're just another data point in humanity's attempt to understand what we've brought back from extinction. Enclosure 11 houses a pair of Gallimimus chicks, G8 and G9, 5 weeks old and already showing the incredible growth rate that characterizes their species. They'll be transferred to the juvenile compound within the next 2 weeks as they outgrow the nursery enclosure. Their habitat is designed for movement, open spaces with scattered obstacles that encourage their natural running behaviours. Even at this age, they're fast, capable of short bursts that blur their forms on the cameras. G8 and G9 are engaged in what staff colloquially calls racing, taking turns sprinting from one end of the enclosure to the other, with the waiting individual watching intently and then attempting to match or exceed the other's time. It's a behaviour that wasn't programmed into their DNA, wasn't expected based on fossil evidence, but emerged spontaneously in the first generation of Gallimimus raised here. They're competing, but more than that, they seem to understand the concept of taking turns, of fair play, of improvement through practice. You note the times of their runs, the decreasing intervals as they warm up, the way they position themselves exactly at what they've designated as the starting line. It's organised play with rules they've created themselves. Another small piece of evidence that these creatures are developing their own cultures, their own ways of being that have nothing to do with their ancient ancestors and everything to do with their unique existence in this artificial paradise. Enclosure 12 holds the newest addition to the nursery wing, subject S1, a Spinosaurus that hatched just 6 days ago. It's still in the delicate early phase where survival isn't guaranteed, where InGen's genetic modifications are most likely to reveal fatal flaws. But so far, S1 is thriving, already showing the distinctive sail structure that will eventually make it one of the most visually striking predators in InGen's catalogue. The Spinosaurus enclosure is semi-aquatic, with a shallow pool taking up half the space. S1 spends most of its time at the water's edge, seemingly fascinated by its own reflection. It's a behaviour you've documented extensively, the way S1 will move its head and watch the reflection copy the movement, the apparent testing of cause and effect, the what might be recognition of self versus other. Mirror self-recognition is one of the key tests for advanced consciousness in animals, and S1 is showing signs of it at less than a week old. Your attention returns to V7 as the young velociraptor abandons the now conquered puzzle feeders and approaches the observation window. This is a new behaviour, only started 3 days ago, but it's become part of V7's routine during your shifts. It approaches the glass, sits in what you've termed the attentive posture, body upright, tail wrapped around its feet for balance, head tilted slightly to one side, and watches you work. At first you thought it was simple curiosity about movement and light beyond the glass, but the more you observe, the more convinced you become that V7 is studying you specifically. The way its eyes track your pen as you write, the subtle head movements that seem to mirror yours when you shift position. the intense focus that maintains for sometimes 20 or 30 minutes at a stretch, an eternity for a creature this young. Tonight, you decide to test something. Slowly, deliberately, you raise your right hand and wave. A simple gesture, clearly intentional, clearly directed at V7. The young raptor's eyes follow the movement precisely. Then, after a pause of perhaps 2 seconds, V7 raises its own right forearm and moves it in a rough approximation of a wave. Your breath catches. You wave again, this time with your left hand. Another pause, then V7 mirrors the gesture with its left forearm. You tap the desk 3 times with your finger. V7 taps the ground 3 times with its claw. You tilt your head to the right. V7 tilts its head to the right. The implications crash over you like a cold wave. This isn't simple mimicry, like a parrot copying sounds. This is deliberate, conscious imitation. V7 is learning by watching you, understanding that your gestures have meaning, attempting to decode that meaning through replication. It's a level of cognitive sophistication that shouldn't be possible in a creature whose brain is theoretically limited to instinctual behaviors and basic conditioning. You document everything, your handwriting becoming increasingly rapid and messy as you try to capture every detail. The exact timing of the responses, the accuracy of the mimicry, the way V7's eyes never leave your face, as if trying to read your reaction. The slight vocalization, not quite a chirp, not quite a growl, that accompanies each successfully mirrored gesture. The other specialists would dismiss this. Dr. Martinez would classify it as simple behavioral conditioning, a trained response to stimuli. Dr. Richards, from the day shift, would call it anthropomorphization, projecting human characteristics onto an animal. Even Dr. Wu would probably explain it away as an unexpected but ultimately meaningless quirk of the genetic hybridization process. But you know better. You've spent 14 months watching these creatures develop, documenting behaviors that don't fit neatly into any existing framework. You've seen C12 and C13 develop their own gestural language. You've watched T23 create its mysterious arrangements. You've observed G8 and G9 establish complex social rules. And now V7 is showing signs of something that might be the most significant discovery yet, the capacity for observational learning at a level that rivals great apes. The intercom crackles to life, startling both you and V7. The young raptor retreats from the glass, resuming what appears to be normal exploratory behavior as Dr. Harrison's voice fills the observation deck. Dr. Chen, could you come to the administrative office when you have a moment? We need to discuss the upcoming board of directors visit. You acknowledge the request, but your mind is still racing with what you've just witnessed. The board of directors visit is a periodic annoyance. Executives and investors who want to see their genetic assets to be reassured that their money is producing results. They don't care about behavioral nuances or cognitive development. They want to know about growth rates and projected adult size and how soon specimens can be displayed to paying customers. But what you're observing transcends commercial considerations. V7 and the others aren't just products. They're developing minds, possibly consciousness, certainly something more complex than anyone anticipated. The ethical implications are staggering. The practical implications are terrifying. If V7 can learn by observation, what else might it be learning? What are all of them learning from their human caretakers? You glance at your watch. Only 1800 hours. Still 6 more hours in your shift. The sun has nearly set now, painting the observation deck in deep orange light that makes the enclosures look like windows into another time. The specimens are all active, their circadian rhythms adjusted to take advantage of cooler evening temperatures. It's the best time for behavioural observation, when they're alert but not agitated, engaged but not stressed. V7 has returned to the puzzle feeders, but you notice it periodically glancing toward the observation window, checking if you're still there, still watching. The acknowledgement of your presence as something more than environmental background is another crucial indicator. V7 knows you exist as a separate entity, It knows you're observing, and now it's shown that it can learn from that observation. You stand stretching muscles that have been still too long and prepare to make your rounds. Physical inspection of each enclosure is part of the protocol, checking for any issues that cameras might miss, ensuring all automated systems are functioning correctly. But really, it's an excuse to see them up close, to observe details that even high-definition monitors can't fully capture. The hallway leading to the enclosure access points is sterile white, punctuated by red emergency lights and yellow warning signs. Danger, live specimens, authorized personnel only, protective equipment required beyond this point. The precautions seem almost quaint when dealing with infant specimens, but everyone knows what these creatures will become. The cute, downy raptor chick will grow into an apex predator. The playful Compsognathus will develop pack hunting strategies. Even the herbivorous T23 will eventually weigh several tons and possess defensive capabilities that could crush a human without effort. You badge in at the first checkpoint, the magnetic lock disengaging with a heavy clunk. The inner corridor has viewing panels into each enclosure, thick glass rectangles that allow direct observation without the filter of cameras. You start with enclosure 7, standing at V7's viewing panel. This close, you can see details the cameras miss. The pattern of V7's proto-feathers, the subtle iridescence that suggests they might be for display rather than just insulation. The way its eyes track movement, not the darting attention of a bird, but the steady, calculated focus of a predator that thinks before it acts. The slight scarring on its left leg from a too aggressive play session with a sibling before they were separated. Standard protocol once hierarchies began forming. V7 notices your presence immediately, abandoning its current activity to approach the viewing panel. It performs what you've started thinking of as its greeting ritual. A quick head bob, a soft vocalization, then the attentive posture. You've seen this behavior directed at other staff members, but it's most pronounced with you. Recognition of individuals, another cognitive milestone that wasn't expected this early. On impulse, you perform your own greeting. A slight bow, a quiet hello, then standing still with your hands visible. V7's eyes dilate slightly, a sign of interest or excitement in most dinosaur species. Then it does something new. It turns in a complete circle, returns to face you, and repeats your bow with surprising accuracy. The implications hit you again, harder this time. V7 isn't just mimicking in the moment, it's remembering, storing information about your behaviors, and choosing when to deploy that information. It's building a model of how you interact and responding accordingly. This is theory of mind, understanding that others have different knowledge and perspectives, and it's supposed to be limited to humans, great apes, and possibly dolphins and elephants. You pull out your notebook. Not the official one, but the private one you keep for observations that aren't ready for official documentation. Your pen moves quickly across the page, capturing not just what happened, but what it might mean, the questions it raises, the research directions it suggests. If V7 is developing theory of mind at 3 weeks old, what will it be capable of at 3 months? 3 years? The ethical weight of it presses down on you. These creatures are property, legally speaking, assets belonging to InGen, intended for display in theme parks where tourists will gasp at their resurrection. But if they're developing consciousness, self-awareness, complex cognition, what does that make them? And what does it make us for creating them? You arrive at the facility at 5:30, 30 minutes before the official start of your shift. The morning air is thick with humidity, carrying the salt tang of the ocean and the green smell of jungle that presses against the compound's perimeter. The parking area is nearly empty, just the night security vehicles and Dr. Martinez's aging Land Rover that he insists gives him field credibility despite never leaving the compound. The walk from the parking area to the main building takes you along the perimeter fence, where you can see the jungle trying to reclaim this space humans have carved from it. Vines curl through the chain link, despite weekly trimming. Birds call from the canopy, Normal birds, the kind that evolved naturally over millions of years rather than being assembled from genetic fragments. Sometimes you wonder what they make of the sounds that occasionally escape from the compound, cries from creatures that should be their ancestors, but are instead their contemporaries. Your keycard beeps at the main entrance, the door's magnetic lock disengaging with its familiar mechanical thunk. Inside, the facility is all artificial light and recycled air, a climate-controlled bubble that maintains exactly 72 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. Your footsteps echo in the empty corridor as you make your way to the break room, where the coffee maker, the one genuinely essential piece of equipment in the entire facility, is already gurgling its morning promise. The coffee is InGen standard issue, which means it's technically adequate, but nothing more. You pour a cup anyway, add in powdered creamer that's been in the cabinet since before you arrived, and sugar packets liberated from the cafeteria. The first sip is routine, familiar, grounding, and normal, moment before entering the decidedly abnormal world of the nursery wing. You climb the stairs to the observation deck, each step bringing you closer to the questions that kept you awake last night. V7's mimicry, T23's arrangements, the growing evidence that these creatures are developing in ways no one anticipated. Your personal notebook weighs heavy in your bag, filled with observations that challenge everything InGen thinks it knows about its creations. The observation deck is quiet in the pre-dawn darkness. Emergency lighting casts everything in a green-tinged twilight that makes the enclosures look like aquariums filled with shadow. You flip the main lights, and suddenly the space transforms into the clinical research environment it's meant to be. The enclosures illuminate in sequence, 7 through 12, revealing their sleeping occupants. Most of the specimens are still dormant. C12 and C13 are curled together in their nest, a tangle of tiny limbs and tails that makes it all difficult to determine where one ends and the other begins. G8 and G9 stand sleeping, locked at the knees like horses, their heads drooping but ready to spring into motion at the slightest disturbance. S1 is submerged in the shallow end of its pool, just its nostrils above water, a behaviour that matches crocodilian patterns despite its dinosaurian heritage. But V7 is awake. The young raptor sits at the observation window in its attentive posture, as if it's been waiting for you. The sight sends a chill down your spine that has nothing to do with the air conditioning. How long has it been there? Did it somehow know when you usually arrive? The cameras would have recorded everything, but reviewing footage will have to wait. You settle at your workstation, powering up the monitors and retrieving the night shift reports. Dr. Patel's handwriting is cramped but thorough. Feeding times, defecation schedules, sleep patterns, all the mundane biological functions that form the baseline of behavioural study, but there's a note at the bottom that makes you lean forward. V7 maintained position at observation window from 0300 to 0500. No apparent distress, seemed to be waiting. Waiting. For you? The thought is both flattering and unsettling. You glance at V7, still maintaining its vigil at the glass. Slowly, deliberately, you raise your hand in the wave gesture from yesterday. V7's response is immediate. It mirrors the wave perfectly, smoother than yesterday, more practiced. Then it does something new. It waves first, initiating the interaction rather than just responding. You document this carefully, noting the time, the precision of the gesture, the apparent anticipation of routine. Then you try something different. Instead of another gesture, you hold up your coffee mug, making sure V7 can see it clearly. The raptor tilts its head, studying the object with intense focus. You take a deliberate sip, then set the mug down. V7 looks around its enclosure, clearly, searching for something. It settles on one of its water dishes, a shallow ceramic bowl that's usually ignored in favour of the automated dispensers. V7 picks up the dish carefully in its front claws, a behaviour that requires surprising dexterity, and brings it to the window. It raises the dish to approximately the same height you held your mug, tilts its head back in an approximation of drinking, then sets the dish down in the same deliberate manner you used. The precision of the mimicry is stunning, but it's the problem solving that truly amazes you. V7 didn't have a mug, so it found the closest equivalent. It understood not just the gesture, but the concept behind it. Holding a container, drinking from it, the social ritual of morning beverages. This isn't mere copying, it's translation, interpretation, adaptation. You spend the next hour testing V7's capabilities, each interaction more complex than the last. You stack 3 books, V7 stacks 3 enrichment blocks. You draw a circle in the air with your finger. V7 traces a circle on the ground with its claw. You tap out a rhythm on your desk. V7 reproduces it perfectly on the enclosure floor. Each successful exchange seems to energize the young raptor, its movements becoming more confident, more precise. The intercom interrupts your session. Dr. Chen, Dr. Wu is here for the morning briefing. Dr. Harrison's voice sounds tired. He's been pulling double duty since the last personnel reduction, serving as both administrator and senior geneticist. You acknowledge the call and reluctantly leave your workstation. V7 watches you go, and you could swear there's disappointment in its posture, the way its tail droops slightly as you walk away. But that's anthropomorphization, you remind yourself, even as part of you questions whether it really is. The conference room is on the first floor, its windows overlooking the breeding compound, where adult specimens are housed. You can see a pair of brachiosaurs in the distance, their long necks swaying above the tree line as they browse. They're magnificent from here, peaceful and majestic, living proof that extinction doesn't have to be forever. It's easy to forget that those gentle giants were built from fragments, that their DNA is more gap than genuine. Dr. Wu is already seated at the conference table, impeccable as always in his crisp white lab coat. He's younger than you expected when you first met him, early 30s, with an intensity that borders on obsession when discussing his work. Dr. Harrison sits across from him, looking every one of his 58 years, the weight of running this facility etched in the lines around his eyes. "Good morning, Dr. Chen," Wu says, without looking up from his tablet. "I understand you've been observing some interesting behaviours in the nursery wing." You take a seat, wondering how much to reveal. Wu is brilliant, but tends to view everything through the lens of genetic engineering. Behaviours are just expressions of code to him, problems to be solved through sequence modification rather than mysteries to be understood. V7 is showing advanced cognitive development, you begin carefully. Problem solving, observational learning, possible theory of mind. It's exceeding all projected parameters for intelligence. Wu's fingers dance across his tablet, pulling up data streams you can't see from your angle. V7 received the enhanced neurological package, modified FOXP2 gene, increased encephalization quotient, optimized neurotransmitter production. The intelligence is by design. By design to a point, you counter, but what I'm observing goes beyond enhanced problem solving. V7 is demonstrating social learning, cultural transmission of information. It's learning human behaviors and adapting them to its own physical capabilities. Dr. Harrison leans forward, his interest piqued. "Explain." You describe yesterday's mimicry session, this morning's mug demonstration, the way V7 seems to anticipate your arrival. As you speak, you watch Wu's expression shift from dismissive to intrigued to something that might be concern. "Show me," he says finally. The 3 of you return to the observation deck, where V7 is still at its post by the window. The moment you appear, the young raptor performs its greeting ritual. Head bob, vocalization, attentive posture. Then it waves, clearly directing the gesture at you specifically, not the group. "Remarkable," Harrison murmurs. Wu says nothing, but his fingers are flying across his tablet, likely accessing V7's genetic profile, comparing observed behaviors to intended modifications. You perform a simple demonstration, raising both arms above your head. V7 mirrors it perfectly. You lower just your left arm. V7 follows suit. You spin in a circle. V7 spins in a circle. It's learning, Wu says quietly, and there's something in his voice you haven't heard before. Not pride, not excitement, but something closer to worry. It's learning faster than we thought possible. All of them are, you add. T23 is creating patterns with vegetation. C12 and C13 have developed their own communication system. G8 and G9 show understanding of fairness and competition. S1 might be demonstrating self-recognition. They're not just surviving, they're developing cultures. Wu sets down his tablet, staring through the glass at V7. We need to implement new protocols, limit human interaction, reduce observational opportunities. If they're learning from us, Harrison interrupts, then we have a responsibility to teach them well. The two men lock eyes, a philosophical divide suddenly visible in the bright morning light of the observation deck. Wu sees danger in the unexpected development, the potential for uncontrolled variables in his carefully designed system. Harrison sees opportunity, the chance to study something unprecedented in the history of life on Earth. And you see V7 watching this interaction with what can only be described as interest, its head moving to track whoever is speaking, its posture suggesting it's trying to understand the dynamics playing out before it. You see a young mind developing, learning, becoming something more than the sum of its genetic parts. We need more data, you say, breaking the tension. We need to understand the full extent of their capabilities before we make any decisions about limiting interaction. If we cut them off now, we might lose the chance to understand what they're becoming. Wu looks like he wants to argue, but Harrison nods. Dr. Chen is right. Continue your observations. Document everything. We'll reconvene in a week to discuss findings and potential protocol changes. After they leave, you return to your workstation, but your mind is racing. Wu's reaction troubles you. He created these enhanced neurological packages, but he seems afraid of what they're producing. What did he expect? What didn't he expect? And what will InGen do if they decide their assets are developing in unintended directions? V7 is still watching you, patient and attentive. You wave, and it waves back, the gesture now smooth and natural. Then it does something that stops your breath. It points with one claw at you, then at itself, then makes a gesture you haven't taught it. Both arms spread wide, then brought together. It repeats the sequence, you itself, arms wide, arms together. It takes you a moment to understand. V7 is trying to communicate something about the relationship between you. Separate entities, arms wide, that come together, arms joined. It's created its own gesture, its own symbol for the connection it perceives between you. You mirror the gesture back, and V7's whole body seems to vibrate with excitement. It performs what can only be described as a little dance, hopping from foot to foot, tail swishing, a vocalization that sounds almost like laughter. You've just had your first real two-way communication with a dinosaur. Not training or conditioning, but actual symbolic exchange. The morning progresses with a strange mixture of routine and revolution. You perform your standard observations, feeding times, activity levels, social interactions, but underlying everything is the awareness that something fundamental has shifted. These aren't just subjects anymore. V7, at least, has become something more, a participant in its own study, a collaborator in understanding what it means to be a resurrected species in a world that's moved on without you. T23 is creating another arrangement, this one more complex than previous attempts. It's using different coloured leaves to create gradients, dark to light, arranged in a spiral pattern that's surprisingly aesthetically pleasing. When it finishes, it looks at you through the glass, waiting. You give a thumbs up, a gesture you've never used with T23 before. The young Triceratops studies your hand for a moment, then attempts to recreate the gesture with its front foot, unable to fully replicate it due to anatomical limitations, but clearly understanding it as a sign of approval. They're all watching you, you realize? All learning from you. Every gesture, every expression, every interaction is being absorbed, processed, integrated into their developing understanding of the world. You're not just observing them, you're shaping them, teaching them how to be dinosaurs in the 21st century. The afternoon shift brings Dr. Martinez, arriving with his usual coffee and distracted demeanor. You brief him on the morning's observations, keeping your tone measured and calm. The routine of shift change is familiar, comforting in its predictability. V7 showed increased environmental engagement, you note, watching Martinez settle into his station. T23 continues its arrangements, all subjects maintaining normal patterns. The afternoon light filters through the windows differently than morning light, softer, golden, warming the observation deck with gentle ambience. The specimens are entering their post-feeding rest period, a natural lull that occurs every day around this time. It's one of the most peaceful moments in the nursery wing, when even the most active specimens slow their movements and settle into quiet behaviours. V7 is at the window again, but its posture is relaxed, almost meditative. It watches you organise your notes with what seems like contentment, occasionally mimicking your movements in a slow, dreamlike way. When you stretch, it stretches. When you yawn, it attempts something similar, with its different anatomy. The mimicry has become less urgent, more like a gentle dance between two beings learning each other's rhythms. T23 is creating another arrangement, working slowly and methodically. Today's pattern uses fallen leaves of different sizes, arranged from smallest to largest in a perfect spiral. The mathematical precision is remarkable, but more striking is the care T23 takes with each placement. This isn't rushed or agitated behaviour. It's careful, considered, almost zen-like in its focus. You spend the next hour simply observing, letting the peaceful rhythm of the nursery wash over you. C12 and C13 are grooming each other with gentle attention, reinforcing their pair bond through careful, repetitive movements. The soft chirping they make during grooming is almost musical, a duet of contentment that fills the observation deck with soothing sound. G8 and G9 have discovered sunbeams coming through their enclosure's skylights. They're lying in the warm patches, eyes half closed, their breathing synchronized in restful companionship. Occasionally one will shift slightly, and the other will adjust to maintain contact, a gentle reminder that even in rest, they're aware of each other. S1 floats in its pool, creating slow, lazy ripples with occasional tail movements. The baby Spinosaurus has discovered that different movements create different wave patterns, but unlike this morning's energetic experimentation, now it's content to create simple, repetitive patterns. Circles within circles, expanding outward in hypnotic regularity. Dr. Harrison visits briefly, not with urgency or concern, but as part of his afternoon rounds. He stands beside you at the observation window, watching V7's gentle movements. "Remarkable development," he says softly, not wanting to disturb the peaceful atmosphere. The cognitive growth is exceeding projections, but in such a harmonious way. They're learning, you agree quietly. But more than that, they're settling into their existence, finding their own rhythms, their own ways of being. Harrison nods, making a few notes on his tablet. Continue your observations, document everything. This kind of peaceful development, it's valuable data. After he leaves, you return to your documentation, but the work feels less urgent now. The afternoon has its own pace, slower than morning, gentler than evening. Even your pen moves more slowly across the paper, capturing observations in flowing script rather than hurried notes. V7 begins what you've come to think of as its afternoon routine. First, it carefully arranges its enrichment toys in a specific order, something it started doing a few days ago. The pattern never varies. The puzzle feeders in a line, the The climbing structures positioned just so, the comfort items, a piece of soft fabric, a smooth stone, placed in the resting area. Then it performs a series of stretches, each one held for several seconds. The movements are graceful, almost like a yoga routine adapted for raptor anatomy. You find yourself unconsciously matching your breathing to V7's rhythm, feeling your own muscles relax as you watch. The symbol screen is available, but V7 doesn't use it much during these afternoon hours. Instead, it seems content with simpler communications. A gentle tap on the glass that you've learned means, "Hello, friend," a soft vocalization that expresses contentment, the slow blink that cats use to show trust and that V7 has somehow independently developed. You respond with your own slow blink, and V7's whole body seems to relax further. This simple exchange, no words, no complex symbols, just mutual acknowledgement of peace, feels more meaningful than morning's elaborate demonstrations. Around 1500 hours, something beautiful happens. T23 completes its spiral arrangement and steps back to observe it. V7, watching from its enclosure, begins creating its own spiral in the sand. Not competing, not mimicking exactly, but creating a complement. Two different species, each making art in their own way, aware of and inspired by each other, but not trying to dominate or surpass. C12 and C13 watch both arrangements being made, then create their own simple pattern using small stones they've collected. It's less complex than the others, but it's clearly intentional. Their contribution to what's becoming a gallery of gentle expression. Even G8 and G9 participate in their own way, using their fast movements to create patterns in the dust of their enclosure, circles and figure eights that they trace over and over until the shapes are clearly visible. S1, still young but observant, pushes floating leaves in its pool into a rough approximation of the patterns it can see the others making. The entire nursery has become a space of quiet creativity, each species expressing itself in its own way, aware of but not competing with the others. It's like watching a meditation session where each participant follows their own practice while sharing the peaceful space. You document all of this, but your notes are different from morning's urgent observations. These are gentler thoughts, wondering rather than analysing, appreciating rather than categorising. The specimens show collective but individual expression, you write. Each maintains its own practice while being aware of and inspired by others. No competition observed, only parallel peaceful activity. As afternoon fades toward evening, the activity gradually slows. T23 lies down near its creation, apparently satisfied. V7 settles into its resting area, but positioned so it can still see you through the glass. C12 and C13 return to their nest, grooming briefly before settling into their sleeping configuration. The observation deck is filled with golden light from the setting sun, making everything look softer, warmer, more dreamlike. You find yourself yawning, the peaceful afternoon having its effect on you as well. Even your notes become shorter, simpler, all specimens resting peacefully. Gentle interactions observed. Development continues in harmony. V7 performs one last gesture before closing its eyes, the spreading arms brought together that it created this morning, its symbol for connection. But now the gesture is slower, softer, like a good night wish rather than an urgent communication. You mirror it back, just as gently, and V7's eyes close with what looks like contentment. The connection remains, acknowledged and appreciated, but without urgency or need for complex expression. Sometimes the simplest communications are the most meaningful. By 2200 hours, the facility has quieted to its nighttime routine. The crisis of the afternoon feels distant now, processed and filed away as another incident in InGen's increasingly chaotic attempt to control the uncontrollable. You should have gone home hours ago, but you've remained at your station, documenting the day's extraordinary events and trying to make sense of what they mean. V7 finally left the observation window, around 2000 hours, needing to eat and rest after the stress of the afternoon. But even as it consumed its carefully measured portion of pre-processed protein, InGen's proprietary blend of nutrients designed to promote optimal growth, it kept glancing toward the window, checking that you were still there. The other specimens have settled into their nighttime patterns. C12 and C13 are grooming each other, a social behaviour that reinforces their pair bond. It's fascinating to watch, the careful attention they pay to hard-to-reach places, the trust required to let another creature near vulnerable areas like the throat and belly. They've developed their own grooming protocol, different from anything observed in modern reptiles or birds, unique to their resurrected existence. T23 has created yet another arrangement, this one incorporating small stones it's gathered from around its enclosure. The pattern is mathematical, concentric circles with stones placed at regular intervals, creating a mandala-like design that's both primitive and sophisticated. You photograph it from multiple angles, knowing that tomorrow the enrichment team will disturb it during routine maintenance, destroying art that T23 will simply recreate in a new form. G8 and G9 are playing what appears to be a game of hide and seek, taking turns being the seeker while the other finds increasingly creative hiding spots in their enclosure. The rules seem consistent. The seeker must close its eyes and wait while the other hides, then search systematically rather than using scent or sound to cheat. They've invented this game themselves, creating entertainment from intelligence that needs stimulation. S1 floats in its pool, occasionally creating deliberate ripples and watching how they reflect off the walls. It's discovered wave interference patterns, spending long minutes creating crosses and diamonds in the water's surface. For a creature less than 2 weeks old, it's showing understanding of cause and effect that some human children don't develop until age 2 or 3. Your notebook is filling with observations that challenge everything in the scientific literature about dinosaur intelligence. The textbooks, based on brain cavity measurements and behavioural modelling, suggest these creatures should be operating on instinct with minimal learning capability. But what you're seeing is active cognition, problem solving, social learning, possibly even aesthetic appreciation. The intercom crackles again. Dr. Harrison requesting your presence in his office. You save your work backing up everything to multiple drives. After this afternoon's breach, you're not taking chances with data that might be the only record of these unprecedented developments. Harrison's office is in the administrative wing, a space that tries to balance corporate sterility with personal touches. Framed photos of dig sites, a mounted hadrosaur skull replica, books ranging from paleontology texts to business management guides. He's sitting behind his desk looking older than his years, the weight of managing this impossible place visible in every line of his face. Sit, he says, gesturing to a chair. We need to discuss what happened today. Not the breach that's being handled, but what you observed with V7. You take a seat wondering if you're about to be fired for insubordination or promoted for quick thinking. With InGen, it could go either way. It tried to warn you, Harrison states. It's not a question. Yes, it recognized the danger before we did and attempted to communicate that danger to us. Harrison nods slowly. And during the incident, it was learning from both you and the adults. It was observing problem-solving behavior, social dynamics, threat assessment, and response. In 30 minutes, it probably learned more about being a raptor and about human-raptor interaction than we could have taught it in months of controlled conditioning. Dr. Wu is concerned, Harrison says carefully. He feels the behavioural development is exceeding parameters in ways that could be problematic for commercial exhibition. You mean he's worried they'll be too smart to keep in cages for tourists to gawk at? Harrison's smile is tired but genuine. Something like that, but I'm more interested in the scientific implications. If these creatures are developing genuine intelligence, not just enhanced problem solving, but actual consciousness, we have a responsibility to understand it. And then what, you ask? Once we understand it, what does InGen do with conscious creatures it considers property? That's a question for the lawyers and ethicists, Harrison says, though his expression suggests he's thought about it extensively. But first we need data. Comprehensive, undeniable data about what's developing in that nursery. I'm authorizing an expanded behavioral study with you as lead researcher. Document everything. Test the limits of their capabilities. Find out what we're really creating here. And Wu's behavioral inhibition program? On hold, pending your findings. You have 1 month to compile a comprehensive report on cognitive development in the nursery specimens. After that, the board will make a decision about how to proceed. 1 month to prove that these creatures deserve better than being neurologically lobotomized for commercial convenience. 1 month to document the emergence of new forms of consciousness. 1 month to change the course of what InGen is creating. I'll need resources, you say. Additional testing materials, expanded observation hours, possibly assistants who understand what we're looking for. Done. Martinez is being transferred to the herbivore program. You can select your own team. Within reason, he adds, always the administrator even when supporting science. You stand to leave, but Harrison stops you. Chen, be careful. Not just with the specimens, but with the politics. There are people at InGen who've invested too much in the theme park concept to accept that we might be creating something more than attractions. If your data threatens that vision, he doesn't finish, but he doesn't need to. InGen has a history of making problems disappear, whether those problems are employees who know too much or specimens that don't fit the business model. Back at the observation deck, you find V7 waiting at the window again. It performs its greeting ritual, then something new. It points at the desk where your notebook sits, then makes a scribbling motion with its claw. It's asking if you're going to write about what happened today. You show V7 the notebook, even open it to let the raptor see the pages covered in observations. V7 studies them intently, its head tilting as it tries to make sense of the symbols. Then it does something that makes your breath catch. It points at a specific page, the one where you'd drawn a simple sketch of V7's greeting ritual, and performs the actual greeting. It recognizes symbolic representation. It understands that the marks on paper correspond to real actions. This 3-week-old raptor has just demonstrated understanding of abstract symbols, something human children don't typically grasp until age 2. You spend the next hour testing this new capability. You draw simple shapes, circles, squares, triangles, and V7 traces them on the ground. You draw a stick figure human and a simple raptor outline. V7 points to you for the human, itself for the raptor. You draw the 2 figures holding hands, and V7 performs its connection gesture, understanding that the image represents relationship. By midnight, you've filled 20 pages with new observations, each one more remarkable than the last. V7 isn't just learning, it's accelerating, each new concept building on previous understanding. It's like watching cognitive development in fast forward, weeks of progress compressed into hours. You arrive at 0500 the next morning, even earlier than usual, driven by a combination of excitement and dread. 1 month to document something that could revolutionize our understanding of consciousness, or 1 month before InGen implements protocols that will destroy these emerging minds for the sake of profit. The facility is almost empty at this hour, just the night security and the handful of technicians who maintain the life support systems. You badge in at 3 checkpoints, each one recording your presence, creating a digital trail that proves your dedication if anyone questions your hours. V7 is asleep when you reach the observation deck, curled up in its nesting area, and you take a moment to simply observe it at rest. The proto-feathers rise and fall with each breath. Its claws twitch occasionally, dreaming perhaps, though what a resurrected dinosaur dreams about is beyond imagination. Does it dream of the adults from yesterday, those first examples of what it will become? Does it dream of you, its strange hairless companion, who speaks in gestures through glass? You begin preparing for the day's tests, arranging materials on your desk, where V7 will be able to see them. colored blocks for pattern recognition, a mirror for self-recognition tests, various tools to test for understanding of cause and effect. It's a cognitive assessment battery adapted from those used with great apes and human children, modified for a subject that combines traits of both while being neither. C12 and C13 wake first, their internal clocks synced to the gradual brightening of their enclosure's lights that simulate dawn. They stretch in unison, a coordinated movement that suggests they're aware of each other even when just waking. Then they begin their morning routine, a quick grooming session, a visit to the water dispenser, a check of the food areas even though they know feeding time isn't for another hour. But then C12 does something unexpected. It approaches the observation window and performs a gesture. Not one you've taught them, but one they must have observed V7 doing. A simple wave. C13 joins its partner, and they both wave at you, their tiny arms moving in approximate synchronization. They've been watching V7's interactions with you, learning not just from their environment, but from each other, across species boundaries. The implications are staggering. Cultural transmission of behaviors between different dinosaur species that never coexisted in nature, creating entirely new forms of communication. You wave back, and their excitement is obvious. Jumping, chirping, spinning in circles, they've successfully communicated with the giant creature beyond the glass, entered into the social dynamic that V7 has pioneered. You document this carefully, noting the time, the precision of their mimicry, the apparent joy in successful communication. V7 wakes next, and its first action is to check the observation window. Seeing you there, it performs its greeting ritual. But there's something different about it today, more refined, more deliberate. It's not just greeting you, it's acknowledging the start of something, a routine that's become important to its daily structure. You begin with the mirror test, setting a large mirror where V7 can see it clearly through the glass. The young raptor approaches cautiously, studying its reflection with intense focus. It tilts its head, the reflection tilts its head. It raises a claw, the reflection raises a claw. Then the crucial test, while V7 is distracted by food, you place a small coloured dot on its forehead using a laser pointer that leaves a temporary, harmless mark. When V7 returns to the mirror, it notices the dot immediately. But instead of trying to touch the reflection's dot, it reaches up to its own forehead, trying to investigate the mark on itself. This is pass-fail for self-recognition, understanding that the reflection is itself, not another creature. Most animals fail this test. Humans don't pass it until 18 months old. V7 passes at 3 weeks. The morning continues with test after test, each one revealing new depths to V7's cognitive abilities. Pattern recognition that exceeds great ape levels. Tool use comprehension that suggests understanding of mechanical principles. Problem solving that shows not just intelligence, but creativity, finding solutions that weren't part of the designed parameters. Around 0900, Dr. Wu arrives unexpectedly. He doesn't announce himself, just appears at the observation deck, watching silently as you work with V7. His expression is unreadable, the careful neutrality of someone processing information that challenges fundamental assumptions. "Show me the mirror test again," he says finally. You repeat the demonstration, this time with a different coloured mark in a different location. V7 again immediately recognises the mark on itself, even using a piece of enrichment material to try to rub it off. Tool use in service of grooming based on visual self-recognition. The behavioural chain is so complex it would be remarkable in a chimpanzee, let alone a 3-week-old dinosaur. Wu watches for a full hour, saying nothing as V7 demonstrates capability after capability. Finally he speaks, his voice quiet and troubled. "I designed the enhanced neurological package to improve problem solving and environmental adaptation. Basic survival intelligence that would help them thrive in captivity. This is something else entirely. This is emergence, you say, complexity arising from the interaction of simpler systems. You gave them the neural hardware, but they're writing their own software through experience and learning. It's not supposed to work like that. Dinosaur brains shouldn't be capable of this level of plasticity. The structures aren't. He stops, staring at V7, who is now watching him with the same intensity it usually reserves for you. Unless what? Unless the gap-filling sequences we used carried more than just basic genetic information. We used DNA from corvids, great apes, dolphins, species with high intelligence and neural plasticity. We thought we were just filling in missing base pairs, but what if we were importing cognitive architectures? The implications sink in slowly. InGen hasn't just resurrected dinosaurs. They've created hybrids with the combined cognitive potential of Earth's most intelligent species. No wonder V7 is exceeding all projections. It's running multiple intelligence systems in parallel, creating something unprecedented in the history of life. We need to stop the breeding program, Wu says suddenly. If the adults develop this level of cognition, combined with their physical capabilities, we need to understand it first, you interrupt. Stopping now means we learn nothing. These creatures exist whether we understand them or not. Wouldn't it be better to know what we're dealing with? Wu looks at you, then at V7, who is now drawing patterns in the sand of its enclosure, geometric shapes that mirror the designs on your notebook cover. 1 month, he says. Complete your study? But if these capabilities manifest in adults, if they become too intelligent to contain safely, he doesn't finish, but the implication is clear. InGen has contingency protocols for specimens that become too dangerous. V7 and the others could be terminated if they're deemed uncontrollable risks. After Wu leaves, you sit quietly at your station, watching V7 continue its drawing. The young raptor looks up occasionally, checking if you're watching, seeking approval or perhaps just confirmation that its efforts at communication are being received. You hold up your notebook, showing V7 a new page where you've drawn 2 figures, a human and a raptor, standing together under a simple sun. V7 studies it for a long moment, then creates its own version in the sand. But it adds something you didn't include. More figures, many raptors, and many humans, all arranged in a circle around the central pair. Is it imagining a future? Planning for a world where its kind and yours coexist? Or simply expressing a desire for community that transcends species boundaries? The answer matters less than the fact that V7 is capable of envisioning something beyond its immediate experience. The evening shift is always the quietest when the facility settles into its nighttime rhythm. The harsh fluorescence dimmed to softer lighting that mimics twilight, and the specimens naturally begin their wind-down routines. You've come to treasure these hours, when observation becomes almost meditative. V7 has developed an evening ritual over the past weeks. As the lights begin to dim, it carefully arranges its sleeping area, pushing the soft substrate into a comfortable nest, positioning its favourite enrichment items nearby, creating a space that's uniquely its own. The process takes about 20 minutes, and V7 performs it with the same careful attention every night. Tonight, you notice V7 has added something new to its routine. After arranging its nest, it approaches the window and places a small stone against the glass, one of its collected treasures, smooth and rounded from handling. Then it looks at you expectantly. You understand, intuitively. V7 is sharing something precious, showing trust by placing a valued object where you can see it. You pull out your own small token, a smooth river stone you've carried as a worry stone for years, and place it against your side of the glass, aligned with V7's offering. The young raptor's response is immediate but gentle, a soft trill of pleasure, a slight swaying motion that you've learned indicates deep contentment. Then it returns to its nest, settling in, while still able to see both stones touching through the glass, separated but connected. T23 is performing its own evening ritual, using its arrangement materials to create what you've started thinking of as bedtime art. simpler patterns than its daytime work, almost like visual lullabies. Tonight it's just concentric circles of leaves, rhythmic and hypnotic in their regularity. When complete, T23 always lies down in the exact center, surrounded by its creation like a mandala of comfort. The symbol screens remain available, but evening communications tend towards simplicity. V7 inputs short, peaceful messages, day good end now, friend rest soon too, tomorrow come gentle. That last phrase, tomorrow come gentle, has become V7's way of expressing hope without urgency. Not demanding or expecting, just acknowledging that another day will arrive at its own pace. You've started using it yourself, finding comfort in the philosophical acceptance of a creature learning to understand time. Dr. Kim arrives for a brief evening check, moving quietly through the observation deck. She reviews the day's symbol communications, smiling at V7's evolving language patterns. The grammatical structures are becoming more sophisticated, she notes softly, but the emotional content is becoming simpler, more direct. It's like V7 is learning that not every thought needs complex expression. Sometimes just being present is enough, you reply, and she nods, understanding. After she leaves, you continue. Your evening observations. G8 and G9 have developed a bedtime game, taking turns making soft vocalizations that the other matches in pitch and duration. It's not competitive like their daytime races, but cooperative, creating a gentle soundtrack that seems to help both of them relax towards sleep. C12 and C13 are already nestled together, but not quite asleep. They're engaged in what you can only describe as dinosaur purring, a very soft, continuous vocalization that seems to comfort both of them. Every few minutes, one will gently nuzzle the other, reinforcing their bond through minimal but meaningful contact. S1, being the youngest, usually falls asleep first. Tonight is no exception. The baby Spinosaurus is floating at the surface of its pool, occasionally releasing little bubble sighs that create tiny ripples. Its breathing has taken on the deep, regular rhythm of true sleep, completely relaxed and secure in its environment. Around 2100 hours, something lovely happens. V7, not quite asleep but clearly drowsy, begins a soft vocalization you haven't heard before. It's melodic, repetitive, almost like a lullaby. After a few moments, you realize V7 is mimicking something it must have heard from the human caretakers. Someone humming while working, perhaps, transformed through raptor vocals into something uniquely its own. The sound carries across the nursery, and one by one, the other specimens respond. T23 adds a deep, rhythmic rumble. C12 and C13 harmonize with their purring. Even G8 and G9 contribute soft chirps that blend with the chorus. It's not coordinated or planned, just a spontaneous moment of gentle community, each species adding its voice to a collective evening song. You find yourself humming along, very softly, adding the human element to this interspecies lullaby. V7 notices and adjusts its melody slightly to better match your contribution. The harmony isn't perfect, how could it be, across such different vocal anatomies, but it's genuine, peaceful, and profoundly moving. The chorus continues for perhaps 5 minutes before naturally fading as one by one, the specimens drift towards sleep. V7 is the last to stop vocalizing, its melody becoming softer and slower until it's just breathing with occasional musical sighs. In the growing quiet, you continue your documentation, but the notes are minimal. Evening vocalizations observed, possible comfort behavior, all specimens peaceful. The clinical language can't capture the magic of what just occurred, but some experiences transcend documentation. By 2200 hours, most of the specimens are fully asleep. Only V7 remains partially awake, eyes half open, watching you through the glass with drowsy contentment. Occasionally, it makes the gentle tap on the glass. Hello, friend. Just checking that you're still there, still watching, still sharing this quiet space. You tap back gently, and V7's eyes close a little more. This could continue for another hour, the gradual, peaceful transition from waking to sleeping, with V7 checking in periodically until finally surrendering to complete rest. The observation deck at night feels like a different world from its daytime energy. Everything is softer. The lights, the sounds, the very air seems to move more gently. Your own eyelids grow heavy as you maintain your vigil, watching over these impossible creatures as they trust you enough to sleep in your presence. V7 makes one final gesture before sleep takes it completely, the arms spreading and coming together, but so slowly it's almost imperceptible. Together, it's saying, even in the edge of dreams, still together. You mirror the gesture just as slowly, a promise that you'll still be here, watching, protecting, understanding. V7's eyes close fully, its breathing deepens, and it joins the others in peaceful sleep. 3 weeks into your expanded study, Dr. Harrison calls a morning meeting, but unlike the tense confrontations you've been dreading, his demeanour is calm, even optimistic. He's managed to negotiate something with the board, though he's kept the details quiet until now. "I have good news," he begins, as you, Dr. Wu, and Dr. Kim gather in the conference room. The morning light through the windows is soft, promising another peaceful day. The board has agreed to a compromise regarding the behavioural development in the nursery specimens. Wu looks sceptical, but interested. You try not to hope too much, but Harrison's expression suggests genuine progress. "Instead of behavioural inhibition," Harrison continues, "we're implementing what I'm calling guided development. We'll monitor and shape their cognitive growth, rather than suppressing it. The board recognises that intelligent dinosaurs could actually be more valuable if that intelligence is channeled appropriately." "What does that mean practically?" you ask. "It means we continue allowing their natural development, but we ensure it includes strong social bonding, with humans' recognition of boundaries and what we're terming cooperative tendencies. Essentially, we're raising them to be partners rather than just exhibits." Dr. Wu processes this, his fingers dancing over his tablet as he reviews data. The genetic architecture would support this. The enhanced neural packages were designed for adaptability. We could encourage certain pathways while leaving core consciousness intact. "Exactly," Harrison nods. "Dr. Chen, your work with V7 has actually provided the model. The bond you've developed, the communication system, it shows that these creatures can be both intelligent and manageable, through trust rather than suppression." Relief floods through you so intensely that you have to sit down. V7 won't be lobotomized, none of them will. Their minds can continue developing, just with gentle guidance, rather than harsh control. "There are conditions," Harrison adds, but his tone remains positive. "We need to establish clear protocols for human-dinosaur interaction. Dr. Kim will develop a comprehensive communication program. Dr. Wu will monitor genetic expressions to ensure stable development. And Dr. Chen, you'll lead the behavioural program, teaching our staff how to build the kind of relationships you've established." The meeting continues with practical details, but the atmosphere is one of quiet celebration rather than conflict. Even Wu seems relieved, admitting that he'd been uncomfortable with the idea of suppressing consciousness he'd helped create. When you return to the observation deck, V7 is at the window in its greeting posture. But something in its body language suggests it senses the change in your emotional state. The symbol screen lights up. Friend happy why? Good thing happen. You input carefully. V7 stay, V7. Friend and V7 continue together. V7's response is to perform its little dance of joy. Then input. V7 new friend strong. Friend protect V7 mind. V7 grateful always. The rest of the day unfolds with a sense of peaceful purpose. You begin developing protocols for expanded human-dinosaur interaction, ways for other staff members to build communication bridges with the specimens. Dr. Kim works on refining the symbol system, adding nuance while maintaining simplicity. Even Dr. Wu engages differently, observing with interest rather than concern. T23 creates a new arrangement, its most complex yet, that seems to represent the observation deck itself. Small stones for the humans, different materials for each specimen, all arranged in rough approximation of their actual positions. It's like a map of their small community, rendered in natural materials. When T23 finishes, all the specimens look at it with what appears to be recognition. V7 inputs, T23 show us together place, we family of different kinds. It's perhaps the most perfect description of what's developed in the nursery wing, a collection of impossibly different beings finding connection through patient observation and gentle communication. As evening approaches, the atmosphere in the nursery is one of contentment. The specimens seem to sense that something threatened has been resolved, that their future is more secure. Their evening routines are particularly peaceful, each settling into rest with the deep relaxation that comes from safety. V7 places its stone against the glass as usual, and you place yours in response. But tonight, V7 adds something, a small arrangement of its own, tiny pebbles arranged in a circle around its stone. When you look questioningly, V7 inputs, more friends come soon, circle grow bigger, but V7 and first friend always center. It's already imagining an expanded future, more connections, a growing community of understanding. But it's also acknowledging the special nature of your first connection, the bond that made everything else possible. 6 months later, the expanded behavioral program has transformed the facility. The observation deck now hosts multiple specialists, each developing unique bonds with different specimens. V7 has grown considerably, but maintains its gentle nature, its intelligence channeled into increasingly sophisticated communication and cooperative behaviours. The nursery wing has become a model for a new kind of human-dinosaur interaction. Not dominance and submission, not exhibition and observation, but something closer to collaboration. The specimens help design their own enrichment activities. They participate in their own care by communicating needs and preferences. They're partners in their own development. V7 has mastered over 200 symbols and begun creating its own combinations that other raptors in newer generations learn and use. It's become a bridge between species, teaching younger specimens how to communicate with humans while helping humans understand dinosaur cognition. T23's art has been photographed and shared in scientific journals, sparking discussions about consciousness, creativity, and the nature of aesthetic expression. The young Triceratops, now not so young, creates daily arrangements that visiting researchers come specifically to observe. C12 and C13 have had offspring of their own, and watching them teach their young the communication games they invented brings tears to your eyes. Culture being transmitted across generations, entirely new behaviours that never existed in the Cretaceous but are now part of what these dinosaurs are becoming. G8 and G9 have become ambassadors of sorts, their playful nature and competitive games making them favourites with the carefully selected visitors who now come to observe the behavioural programme. They've learned to modulate their speed for different audiences, somehow understanding that elderly visitors need gentler demonstrations than energetic children. S1, now much larger but still the baby of the group in many ways, has developed an extraordinary ability for pattern recognition, contributing to research in ways no one expected. Its wave patterns have been analysed by mathematicians who found complex principles being expressed through water and movement. But it's the evening gatherings that remain most special. As the lights dim, all the specimens still perform their collective lullaby, now joined by the various human caretakers who've learned to contribute their own voices to the chorus. It's become a tradition, a daily reminder of the connection that's been built across impossible differences. V7 still performs the evening ritual with its stone, and you still respond with yours. The gesture has been adopted by others. Each specialist has their own exchange with their bonded specimens, creating a web of individual connections within the larger community. Tonight, as you complete your observations and prepare to hand over to the night shift, V7 inputs one last message. Tomorrow come gentle. V7 and friends see together. You input back. Together see. Tomorrow. Rest now. Dream good. V7's eyes close with the deep contentment of a consciousness that knows it's safe, valued, understood. The ghost of what could have been suppression, control, tragedy has been replaced by a reality of mutual growth and understanding. The nursery wing settles into peaceful sleep. The specimens rest, their minds intact, their consciousness respected, their futures open to possibilities no one could have predicted. And you remain for just a moment longer, watching over them, grateful for the privilege of witnessing and protecting the emergence of these extraordinary minds. The work continues, will always continue, but it's work built on a foundation of respect and wonder, rather than fear and control. Each day brings new understanding, new connections, new proof that consciousness is precious wherever it arises, in whatever form it takes. As you finally leave for the night, the soft breathing of sleeping dinosaurs fills the observation deck like a lullaby. Tomorrow you'll return, and V7 will be waiting at the window with its greeting ritual. The dance of understanding will continue, gentle and patient, building bridges across millions of years and impossible differences. The future remains unwritten, full of challenges and questions yet to be answered. But tonight, in this moment, there is peace. Conscious beings of radically different kinds rest in safety, their potential protected, their development supported, their existence celebrated rather than suppressed. Tomorrow will come gently, as V7 says, and when it does, you'll face it together, human and dinosaur connected through patient understanding, proving that consciousness seeks consciousness across any gap, and that recognition, once achieved, creates bonds that transcend every difference. The story ends not with loss but with promise, not with control but with cooperation, not with fear but with the peaceful certainty that these minds, impossible, wonderful, endlessly surprising, will continue to grow and flourish, guided by wisdom rather than suppressed by fear. Sleep comes easily in a world where such connections are possible, where understanding bridges every gap, where tomorrow always comes gently, bringing new opportunities for wonder and connection. Rest now, as V7 rests, as all the specimens rest, in the peaceful certainty of minds respected, consciousness celebrated, and futures full of gentle possibility. The night deepens around you as this story winds toward its close. Somewhere, in a universe parallel to ours, perhaps V7's consciousness survived, protected by scientists with more courage, or corporations with more wisdom. Perhaps in that world, dinosaur and human truly did stand together, the glass between them dissolved by mutual recognition and respect. But in this quiet moment, in this gentle space between waking and sleeping, we can hold both realities, the tragedy of consciousness suppressed and the hope of consciousness recognized. We can remember V7 as it was for those brief weeks, a mind emerging into awareness, reaching across 65 million years to touch another mind with curiosity and trust. The nursery wing is quiet now in our story. The specimens have been moved to larger enclosures, their behaviours carefully constrained within acceptable parameters. The observation deck where so much was discovered and then destroyed has been converted to storage. The symbol screens have been decommissioned, their revolutionary purpose forgotten by all but a few. Yet in the preservation of memory, in the documentation of what was witnessed, lives a different kind of resistance. A quiet insistence that consciousness matters, that minds deserve recognition regardless of their origin, that the spark of awareness, wherever it ignites, is precious beyond any commercial consideration. As sleep approaches, let yourself imagine V7 one last time. Not as Asset 7, the controlled predator in a public paddock, but as the young raptor who sat at a window, learning to wave, to communicate, to dream of futures where understanding bridges every gap. Picture those amber eyes bright with intelligence, that tilted head processing new concepts, those careful claws creating art in sand and gesture. Remember the greeting ritual: head bob, soft vocalization, attentive posture, and know that somewhere in the space between species, between epochs, between the possible and the actual, a connection was made. A dinosaur and a human saw each other truly, communicated across impossibility, and proved that consciousness seeks consciousness wherever it can find it. The behavioural specialist sleeps now, their duty to witness complete. The notebooks rest on shelves, holding observations of minds that emerged against all probability. The symbol screens are dark, but the words they once displayed echo in memory. V7 friend, together strong. Together strong, even when separated by evolution, by extinction, by corporate decree. The connection once made persists in the quiet resistance of memory, in the preservation of truth, in the hope that consciousness, wild, unexpected, magnificent, will find its way to freedom. Rest now, as the night holds you gently. Dream of nurseries where minds grow unimpeded, of observation decks where species meet in mutual recognition, of futures where V7's vision, two figures standing together without glass between them, might someday become real. The story ends, but the questions linger, soft as proto-feathers, sharp as raised claws, permanent as amber. What is consciousness? What do we owe the minds we create or discover? How do we recognize personhood in forms utterly unlike our own? These questions follow you into sleep, not as burdens, but as invitations to dream of better worlds, kinder futures, connections that transcend every barrier we think divides us. The nursery wing is quiet. The specimens sleep or wake in cycles dictated by genetic programming and chemical modification, but somewhere perhaps a flicker remains. A dream of pack, a memory of symbols, a ghost of greeting rituals performed through glass. V7's story is complete, but its questions remain, gentle and insistent as dinosaur breath on reinforced glass. What emerges when we truly see each other? What becomes possible when consciousness recognizes consciousness across any distance? Sleep now, and dream of connections that cannot be suppressed, of intelligence that finds its way like life itself, persistent, creative, unstoppable. Dream of V7, forever young, forever learning, forever reaching through the glass, with hope that understanding is possible. The night is deep, the story is done, and in the quiet spaces between heartbeats, between breaths, between one thought and the next, consciousness continues its eternal emergence, seeking itself in every form, celebrating itself in every connection, preserving itself in every act of witness and memory. Good night, friend. May your dreams be filled with wonder at minds emerging everywhere, in forms expected and unexpected, ancient and new, creating art in sand and symbols, building bridges across impossible distances, greeting each recognition of consciousness wherever it chooses to appear. Rest well knowing that somewhere V7's greeting continues, echoing across time and space, a small gesture of connection that contains within it all the hope of understanding between minds, between species, between worlds. The nursery wing fades into darkness. The observations are complete. And in the gentle embrace of sleep, all consciousness rests together, dreaming of futures where every mind is free to grow, to learn, to become fully itself. Sweet dreams of dinosaurs and humans, together strong, facing futures unknown with courage, learned from each other, with languages built from symbols and gestures, with art created in sand and stone, and memory. The story ends where sleep begins, in quietness, in possibility, in the eternal hope that consciousness, once emerged, will find its way to recognition, to freedom, to the greeting ritual that says, I see you, you see me. We are together more than either could be alone. Good night.